The story begins on a distant, desolate moon orbiting a dying star. The sky is an eerie blend of crimson and deep violet, with shards of light piercing through thick clouds of cosmic dust. The ground is barren, covered in jagged obsidian rock and pulsating veins of bioluminescent moss, creating an otherworldly ambience. In the distance, the ruins of an ancient alien civilization rise, their structures warped and crumbling as if time itself has turned against them. This is Viridia Prime, a forgotten battlefield between humanity and the Zenar Collective, a powerful alien species. The air hums with tension. A cloaked figure stands at the edge of a crumbled precipice, scanning the horizon with a device that emits faint holographic glyphs. This figure is Commander Alaric, a seasoned strategist and leader of humanity's resistance against the Zenar. His face is weathered, marked by years of hardship, yet his piercing blue eyes burn with determination. Introduction to protagonist. Alaric is a man haunted by choices he made during the war, a betrayal that cost him dearly. Once hailed as a hero, he now operates in the shadows, shunned by his own people for the rumored treachery that led to humanity's greatest defeat. His reputation as a traitor precedes him, but Alaric has never stopped fighting for humanity's survival. His thoughts are interrupted by a faint vibration in his ear, a transmission from Lieutenant Cade Aaron, his loyal second-in-command and one of the few who still trusts him. "Commander, we have movement near Sector Theta. It looks like the Zenar are mobilizing again." Alaric sighs, gripping the edge of the rocky ledge. "Understood, Lieutenant. Maintain your position and wait for my signal. We cannot afford another mistake." As he lowers the communicator, his gaze drifts to a small pendant hanging around his neck, a relic of someone he lost long ago. He clenches it tightly, as if drawing strength from the memory. Inciting incident. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembles. A low rumble grows into a deafening roar as a massive Zenar warship emerges from the stormy sky above, its shadow engulfing the ruins. The ship is unlike anything Alaric has seen before, its sleek, organic design pulsating with energy. Alaric's device lights up with frantic warnings. This is no ordinary scouting mission. The Zenar are deploying a weapon of unimaginable power, one that could wipe out what remains of humanity. Before he can react, a figure steps out from the shadows of the ruins. It is Kale Rhine, Alaric's former ally and closest friend, who betrayed humanity to join the Zenar Collective. Kale's appearance is unsettling, his once human form now augmented with alien technology, his eyes glowing with an unnatural amber light. "Alaric," Kale says, his voice a mix of familiarity and alien coldness. "You should not have come here." Alaric's hand instinctively moves to his weapon, but he hesitates. "Kale, after everything, you still have the nerve to face me?" Kale smirks, the expression twisted by the alien implants on his face. "This is not about you and me. This is about evolution, humanity's survival. You are clinging to a doomed species, Alaric. It is time to let go." The tension between them crackles like static electricity, each word charged with years of betrayal and unresolved conflict. Before Alaric can respond, a blinding beam of energy erupts from the warship, targeting the heart of the ruins. The ground shatters, throwing Alaric backward. As he struggles to regain his footing, Kale vanishes into the chaos, his final words echoing in the commander's mind. "You will have to choose, Alaric. Humanity cannot survive without a sacrifice." The ruins collapse around him as Alaric scrambles to escape. The inciting incident has begun, a race against time to uncover the Zenar's plan, confront Kale, and decide whether humanity's survival is worth the cost of his own soul. Protagonist recollections. As the dust settles around him, Alaric stumbles into the shadows of a cavern beneath the ruins. His breathing is labored, the weight of Kale's words pressing on his chest like a vice. He slumps against the cold, jagged wall, his hand instinctively clutching the pendant around his neck. The memories flood in, unbidden and sharp. The pendant had belonged to his younger sister, Lyra Voss, a brilliant scientist who had worked on humanity's initial attempts to broker peace with the Zenar. Lyra had been Alaric's anchor, the one person who believed in him unconditionally. Her laughter had been a beacon in the darkest times, and her determination had rivaled his own. But then, everything changed. Previous incident. The flashback begins on the human colony of Arinder, a thriving settlement that had once been a symbol of hope for humanity's future. Alaric, still a rising star in the military, had been stationed there with Lyra during the early days of the war. The Zenar had yet to reveal their true intentions, and humanity was desperate to establish a truce. Lyra had spearheaded the peace talks, pouring her heart into crafting a message of unity. Alaric had supported her, though he remained skeptical of the Zenar's motives. "They are not like us," he had warned her. "They do not think like us. You cannot trust them." But Lyra had refused to give up. "If we cannot find common ground, Alaric, then we are doomed. War is not the answer." Then came the Arinder massacre. The Zenar had accepted Lyra's invitation to meet, sending a delegation to the colony. It had seemed like a breakthrough until the betrayal. The Zenar had used the meeting as a diversion, launching a surprise attack on Arinder's defenses. Thousands had perished in the assault, including Lyra. Alaric had been powerless to save her, trapped in a command center as the colony burned around him. The memory of her final moments haunted him. Over the comms, Lyra's voice had been calm, even as chaos erupted around her. "Do not blame yourself, Alaric. Promise me you will keep fighting for them." The pendant had been recovered from the rubble, the only piece of her that remained. Alaric had vowed to honor her dying wish, but the cost had been steep. The catalyst of betrayal, the loss of Lyra, had driven a wedge between Alaric and Kale, who had been stationed on Arinder as a special forces operative. Kale had always shared Lyra's idealism, but the massacre shattered his faith in humanity's ability to survive. He had begun to question their methods, their morals, and their very right to exist. Alaric had tried to reason with him, but Kale's disillusionment only grew. The breaking point came when Kale defected to the Zenar, believing their vision of assimilation and evolution was humanity's only hope. He had not gone quietly, sabotaging critical defense systems and leaving humanity vulnerable to further attacks. Alaric had been blamed for Kale's actions. The higher-ups had accused him of failing to see the warning signs, branding him a traitor by association. His career and reputation were destroyed overnight, and the weight of guilt for both Lyra's death and Kale's betrayal had nearly broken him. End of flashback. The cavern is silent as Alaric snaps back to the present, his fingers trembling around the pendant. He forces himself to his feet, his resolve hardening. Kale may have given up on humanity, he mutters to himself, but I will not. Alaric activates his communicator, contacting Lieutenant Cade. "We need to regroup. The Zenar are deploying something far worse than we imagined. And Kale, he is leading them." Cade's voice crackles through. "Understood, Commander. But if Kale is involved, are you ready to face him again?" Alaric pauses, the weight of the past pressing down on him. Then he clenches his fist. "I do not have a choice. It is time to finish what he started." The stage is set for the next chapter, a deeper dive into the alien perspective and the clash of ideals that will shape the fate of humanity. Alien confusion. High aboard the Zenar warship, the command chamber glows with an ethereal light, its walls pulsating with a strange organic rhythm. The air hums with the collective thoughts of the Zenar leadership, a hive-like council whose decisions are synchronized through neural connections. At the center of the chamber stands Kale Rhine, no longer fully human but not entirely Zenar either. His augmented body glimmers with alien circuitry, and his amber eyes flicker as he processes the Council's directives. The Zenar, a species of hyper-evolved beings, value efficiency and unity above all else. They view humanity as fragmented and inefficient, incapable of survival without intervention. To the Zenar, assimilation is not conquest, it is salvation. Yet Kale, once human, struggles to reconcile their logic with the emotions he has buried deep within. One of the council members, A towering Zenar named Valeth addresses Kale telepathically. Your species clings to individuality and emotion, Kale Rhine. These traits make them weak, yet you hesitate to complete their assimilation. Why? Kale's jaw tightens as he stares out at the holographic projection of Viridia Prime below. Because humanity's strength lies in their defiance, he replies aloud, his voice laced with conflict. They resist even when the odds are against them. You see it as weakness, but it is something else. Valeth tilts its elongated head, intrigued by Kale's words. You speak as though you still consider yourself one of them. Kale turns sharply, his tone defensive. I am Zenar now. I serve the collective, but deep down, Kale knows the truth. Despite the Zenar's enhancements and their promises of purpose, a part of him remains tethered to his humanity, a fragment of his soul that refuses to be silenced. Discussion about human nature. Later, in a private chamber, Kale confronts Elora, a Zenar scientist who has been studying humanity for decades. Elora's form is elegant, almost serpentine, with glowing tendrils that shimmer as she speaks. You seem troubled, Kale, Elora observes, her voice resonating like a melody. Is it the encounter with your former commander? Kale exhales slowly, his gaze distant. Alaric is complicated. He was always relentless, always willing to sacrifice everything for humanity. Even now, he fights for a species that has cast him aside. Elora's tendrils curl thoughtfully. Perhaps that is what makes humans intriguing. Their resilience is illogical, yet it drives them to achieve what should be impossible. They destroy themselves and yet refuse to die. Kale shakes his head. Resilience? No, it is stubbornness. Humanity clings to ideals that will lead to their extinction. They reject the evolution we offer them. Elora steps closer, her glowing eyes narrowing. And yet you hesitate. Is it because you still believe in them, or because you fear that what we offer is not truly better? Kale does not respond immediately. Instead, he gazes at the holographic display of Earth, a distant blue surrounded by the void. Memories of his past life surface, of laughter, of camaraderie, of the bond he once shared with Alaric and Lyra. Humanity's strength and weakness are the same, Kale finally says. They feel hope, love, anger. These emotions drive them to great heights, but they also blind them. It is why I chose to join the Zenar, to rise above those flaws. Elora tilts her head. And yet, those flaws are what make you hesitate. Perhaps you are not as far from them as you wish to believe. The Council's directive. Kale is summoned back to the command chamber, where the Zenar Council presents their final plan. The deployment of the Anima Core, a weapon capable of rewriting human DNA and forcibly integrating them into the collective. Valeth speaks with chilling precision. The Anima Core will eradicate humanity's individuality, uniting them with us. The resistance will cease, and evolution will prevail. You, Kale Rhine, will lead this effort. Kale's chest tightens as he hears the directive. You want me to destroy what remains of their humanity. Valeth's response is cold and absolute. Humanity's survival depends on their assimilation. Their defiance only prolongs their suffering. Kale nods mechanically, but as he departs the chamber, doubt gnaws at him. The lines between right and wrong blur, and for the first time, he questions whether the Zenar's vision of perfection is truly worth the cost. Kale's internal struggle. Alone in his quarters, Kale stares at a faded photograph he has kept hidden. A picture of himself, Alaric, and Lyra during their days on Arinder. Lyra's smile is bright, her arm draped casually around Kale's shoulders. Alaric stands beside them, his expression serious but protective. Kale runs a hand over the photograph, his augmented fingers trembling. You would hate what I have become, Lyra, he whispers. But would you understand why I did it? The Zenar may have given Kale a new purpose, but they cannot erase the remnants of his humanity. And as the warship descends toward Viridia Prime, Kale knows that his next encounter with Alaric will force him to confront the very thing he has been running from, the truth about himself and the choices he has made. Critical moment. The warship's descent triggers a cascade of memories for Alaric as he navigates through the dense forest of Viridia Prime, his team in tow. The forest is alive with whispers, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the hum of the Zenar's approaching fleet. But Alaric is lost in another moment, another time. The flashback begins in the aftermath of the Arinder massacre, just weeks after Lyra's death. Alaric had been reassigned to a remote outpost on Carthys 7, a desolate planet where remnants of humanity's forces regrouped to strategize. It was there, in the midst of despair, that Alaric had discovered a hidden strength within himself, a strength that would become the foundation of his personal code. The human code takes shape. The outpost commander, a grizzled veteran named General Myra Falk, had been skeptical of Alaric's presence. "You are a liability, Voss," she had said bluntly. "Your record is stained, your reputation in shambles. Why should I trust you with my soldiers?" Alaric had met her gaze, unflinching. "Because I have nothing left to lose," he replied. "And that makes me dangerous." Myra had not been convinced, but she had given him a chance, leading a reconnaissance mission deep into enemy territory. The mission had been a disaster. Half the team had been captured by the Zenar, their screams echoing over the comms. Alaric had been forced to make an impossible choice: abandon the mission to save his men or complete the objective, securing vital intelligence about the Zenar's next move. He had chosen his men. In a daring and reckless move, Alaric had infiltrated the Zenar base alone, using every ounce of his training to free the captured soldiers. The mission had cost him dearly. He had been injured, and the objective had been compromised, but he had saved lives. When he returned to the outpost, Myra had confronted him. "You disobeyed a direct order, Commander. That intel could have saved millions. What do you have to say for yourself?" Alaric's response had been firm. "Humanity is not numbers on a spreadsheet, General. It is people. People who trust us to fight for them. If we sacrifice that trust, then what are we even fighting for?" Myra had stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "You are a damn fool, Voss. But maybe you are the kind of fool we need." From that moment on, Alaric had lived by a simple code. No life is expendable. The flashback deepens. The flashback shifts to another critical moment on Carthys 7, when Alaric had confronted Kale for the first time since the massacre. Kale had been stationed there as well, his disillusionment with humanity festering like an open wound. "You are wasting your time," Kale had said bitterly, watching Alaric train new recruits. "These people are going to die, Alaric. You are just delaying the inevitable." Alaric had squared his shoulders, his voice steady. "Then we fight until the end, because if we give up, then we are already dead." Kale had laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You still do not get it, do you? Humanity is broken. We fight each other as much as we fight the Zenar. This is not a war we can win." Alaric had stepped closer, his tone fierce. "Maybe not, but it is a war we have to fight. Because if we lose, there is no coming back. And if you cannot see that, then you have already chosen your side." Kale's eyes had darkened, and for a moment, Alaric had seen the man he used to be, the friend who had stood beside him on Arinder. But then the moment had passed, and Kale had walked away, his footsteps echoing like a warning. Human philosophy. The flashback ends with a conversation between Alaric and General Myra, one that had stayed with him through every battle since. "Do you know why I keep fighting?" Myra had asked one night, staring out at the endless desert of Carthys 7. Alaric had shaken his head. "Why?" Myra had smiled faintly. "Because hope is a weapon. As long as we have it, the Zenar cannot win. They do not understand it. They cannot control it. And that is why we have to keep going. Even when it feels like we have nothing left." Those words had become Alaric's mantra, the foundation of his belief in humanity's resilience. Return to the present. As the memory fades, Alaric feels a renewed sense of purpose. The force around him seems less oppressive, the weight of his past lighter. He turns to his team, their faces a mix of fear and determination. "We may be outnumbered," he says, his voice steady, but we are not outmatched. Remember this. The Zenar do not understand what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. That is our advantage. That is what makes us human. The team nods, their spirits lifted by his words. And as the first rays of dawn pierce through the trees, Alaric knows that the battle ahead will test every part of him. But he is ready. Situation escalates. The Zenar warship descends into Viridia Prime's orbit, its shadow casting an eerie pall over the vibrant forest below. The hum of its engines is deafening, vibrating through the air and shaking the ground. Kale Rhine, standing on the observation deck, feels a gnawing unease as he surveys the planet. His internal conflict deepens. Every step he takes toward the mission feels like a betrayal of the man he once was. Below, in the dense jungle, Alaric Voss crouches with his team, their faces lit by the faint blue glow of their communication devices. They have intercepted the Zenar's transmission. Kale is leading the deployment of the Anima Core, a weapon capable of rewriting humanity's DNA and erasing their individuality. Kale is their weapon, Alaric says grimly, his voice carrying the weight of betrayal. But he is still human, somewhere inside. We need to reach him before it is too late. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Marin Ortiz, looks skeptical. You really think he can be reasoned with, after everything he has done? Alaric's jaw tightens. I do not know, but I owe it to him, to Lyra, to try. The team moves silently through the jungle, their goal clear. Infiltrate the Zenar's base of operations and disable the Anima Core before it can be activated. Kale's dual allegiances. On board the warship, Kale is summoned to a briefing with Valeth and Elora. A holographic display shows the Anima Core's activation sequence, its glowing tendrils pulsating with an ominous rhythm. Deployment will commence in 30 minutes, Valeth announces. You, Kale Rhine, will oversee the process and ensure no resistance interferes. Kale nods, his expression unreadable. But as he walks away, Elora follows him, her glowing tendrils flickering with curiosity. You are troubled, she says, her melodic voice cutting through the silence. Kale pauses, his hands clenching into fists. This weapon, it feels wrong. Elora tilts her head. Humanity's resistance is irrational. The Anima Core is mercy, a way to end their suffering. Kale turns to face her, his amber eyes blazing. You do not understand. To you, individuality is a flaw. But to humans, it is everything. It is why they fight, why they endure. Elora studies him for a moment before replying softly. And yet, you stand with us. Perhaps you are not as human as you think. Kale says nothing, but the weight of her words lingers as he heads to the deployment chamber. The resistance makes its move. Alaric's team reaches the outskirts of the Zenar base, their movements precise and silent. The base is a hive of activity, with Zenar drones patrolling the perimeter and energy fields shimmering in the air. Marin taps Alaric on the shoulder, her voice low. We have a problem. That energy field will fry us if we get too close. Alaric surveys the area, his mind racing. We need a distraction, something to draw their attention. While we disable the field, one of the younger soldiers, Private Kellen Reyes, steps forward. I can do it, sir. I will draw their fire. Alaric shakes his head. No, that is too risky. Kellen's eyes are determined. With all due respect, Commander, this is bigger than any of us. Let me do this. Alaric hesitates but finally nods. All right, but be careful. Kellen sprints toward the base, firing a series of decoy rounds that explode in bright flashes of light. The Zenar drones swarm toward the distraction, leaving the energy field momentarily unguarded. Go, go, go! Alaric orders, and the team moves swiftly, planting an EMP device near the field's generator. The field flickers and dies, clearing the way for their infiltration. Kale and Alaric face off. Inside the deployment chamber, Kale watches as the Anima Core begins to power up. The chamber is bathed in an eerie red light, the hum of the core growing louder with each passing second. Kale! The voice cuts through the noise, and Kale turns sharply to see Alaric standing in the doorway, his weapon raised but not aimed. Behind him, the rest of the team fans out, their movements cautious but resolute. For a moment, time seems to freeze as the two men lock eyes. "You should not be here," Kale says, his voice a mix of anger and pain. "And you should not be doing this," Alaric replies, stepping closer. "This is not you, Kale. Whatever the Zenar have done to you, it is not too late to stop." Kale's hands tremble as he tightens his grip on the console. "You do not understand. This is the only way to save humanity. Save them? By destroying what makes them human." Alaric's voice rises, filled with desperation. "That is not saving them, Kale. That is giving up on them." Kale's gaze falters, memories flooding his mind. Of Lyra's laughter, of Alaric's unwavering determination, of the bond they once shared. "You do not know what it is like," Kale says, his voice cracking, "to feel like you have no choice, to lose everything and still be expected to fight." Alaric steps closer, lowering his weapon. "I do know, and so did Lyra. She believed in you, Kale. She believed in us. Do not let her memory be another casualty of this war." Warning moment. Veilitha's voice suddenly echoes through the chamber, cold and commanding. "Kale Rhine, you are compromised. Eliminate the intruders, and proceed with the deployment." Kale's body tenses as his Zenar augmentations activate, his movements becoming sharp and mechanical. Alaric raises his weapon, but his voice remains calm. "Kale, listen to me. You are stronger than this. You are still human." For a moment, Kale hesitates, his augmented eyes flickering between amber and red. The conflict within him is palpable, the lines between his loyalty to the Zenar and his humanity blurring. Finally, Kale speaks, his voice strained but resolute. "I will not be your weapon." He turns to the console, his hands moving rapidly as he begins to deactivate the anima core. Alaric and his team cover him, holding off the Zenar drones that swarm into the chamber. As the core's hum begins to fade, Veilitha's voice grows furious. "You have betrayed the collective, Kale Rhine. This will not be tolerated." Kale smirks faintly, his humanity shining through. "I guess I learned from the best." The reveal. As the anima core powers down, a deafening silence fills the chamber, broken only by the hum of the remaining Zenar drones. Kale stands at the console, his hands shaking as the weight of his decision settles on him. The chamber's lighting shifts to a deep, pulsing red, a clear sign of an impending counterattack. Veilith appears on a holographic screen above the console, her tendrils glowing with fury. "Kale Rhine, you were created to serve the collective. Your defiance is meaningless. You cannot escape what you are." Kale glares at her, his voice steady despite the storm within him. "What I am is human, and you cannot take that away from me." Veilith smirks. "Is that so? Then perhaps it is time for you to remember why you came to us in the first place." The room suddenly shifts, a projection enveloping Kale's mind. He sees himself on the day he was taken by the Zenar, broken and desperate after the death of his sister Lyra. The Zenar promised him power, a way to protect humanity from itself. But in that moment, he realizes the truth. They had manipulated his grief, twisting his pain into loyalty. Kale's knees buckle, but Alaric rushes to his side, pulling him back. "Kale, do not let them get in your head. They are trying to break you." Kale looks up at Alaric, tears streaming down his face. "I let them use me, Alaric. I let them turn me into this." Alaric grips his shoulder firmly. "You are not defined by what they made you. You are defined by what you choose to do now." Internal conflict. Kale stands, his resolve hardening as he turns back to the console. But just as he begins to initiate the core's full deactivation, the chamber trembles violently. The Zenar ship is deploying reinforcements, their overwhelming presence felt even from inside the chamber. Elora steps into the room, her usually calm demeanor now tinged with urgency. "Kale, Stop this madness. If you do this, the Collective will never forgive you. They will hunt you until there is nothing left of your humanity. Kale looks at her, his voice quiet but firm. Then so be it. I would rather die human than live as their pawn. Elara's glowing tendrils flicker, her alien features softening as she takes a step closer. You do not have to choose this path. There is still a place for you among us. Together, we can build something greater, something beyond human limitations. Kale hesitates for a split second, the weight of her words pressing down on him. But then he glances at Alaric, at the man who never gave up on him, and the choice becomes clear. I already have everything I need, Kale says, his voice unwavering. A moment of sacrifice. As Kale inputs the final sequence to disable the anima core, alarms blare throughout the ship. Velatha's voice echoes once more, colder than ever. If you will not serve, then you will be destroyed. The chamber's doors burst open, and a wave of Zenar drones pours in. Alaric and his team take defensive positions, fighting desperately to hold them off. Kale, we are running out of time, Alaric shouts, firing at the advancing drones. Kale glances back at the console, realizing the process will take too long. With a deep breath, he makes a decision. There is another way, he says, his voice heavy with determination. What are you talking about? Alaric asks, his tone sharp. Kale turns to him, his expression both resolute and sorrowful. The only way to fully destroy the anima core is from the inside. I can overload it, but I will not survive. Alaric's eyes widen in shock. No, there has to be another way. Kale steps closer, placing a hand on Alaric's shoulder. This is my choice, Alaric. For the first time in years, I get to choose who I am, and I choose to end this. Alaric's grip on his weapon falters as he shakes his head. Kale, please. But Kale smiles faintly, his amber eyes softening. Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself. Kale's final act. Kale steps back to the console, his hands moving with precision as he overrides the core's safety protocols. Energy pulses erratically through the chamber, the anima core's glow growing brighter and more unstable. Elara watches in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she speaks, her voice tinged with sadness. Goodbye, Kale Rhine. You were more human than I ever realized. As the core reaches critical overload, Kale looks back at Alaric one last time. Get out of here. Live for both of us. Alaric hesitates, his heart breaking, but he knows there is no time to argue. I will not forget you, Kale. Kale nods, a tear slipping down his cheek. I will not forget me either. Alaric and his team retreat, barely making it out of the ship as the anima core detonates in a blinding explosion. The shockwave tears through the Zenar warship, obliterating it in an instant. Humanity's response, or protagonist's decision, the explosion from the anima core ripples through the surrounding void, sending shockwaves that disrupt nearby Zenar fleets. The massive Zenar flagship disintegrates in the aftermath, leaving a blinding light that pierces the darkness of space. Alaric's ship struggles to stabilize in the turbulence. He watches the destruction through the viewport, his heart heavy with grief and pride. He did it, Alaric whispers, his voice breaking. The comm channel crackles to life as the Resistance fleet scrambles to capitalize on the chaos. All ships, this is Commander Della. Kale Rhine has neutralized the Zenar core. This is our chance. Move in and take out the remaining forces. The Resistance fighters roar to life, their ships darting forward with renewed energy. The Zenar forces, disoriented by the destruction of their central hub, falter. On the bridge, Alaric stands at the command console, his focus unwavering despite the ache in his chest. Target their formation. They are vulnerable now. The last stand of the Zenar. The Zenar, though weakened, do not go quietly. Velatha's voice echoes over the comms, her tone icy and unyielding. You may have destroyed the core, but you cannot destroy the collective. We are eternal. As the Zenar ships regroup, Their remaining commanders deploy waves of drones in a desperate counterattack. The Resistance fleet meets them head-on, their determination unshakable. Alaric's ship, battered but operational, leads the charge. He issues orders with precision, directing his team to exploit the Zenar's fractured coordination. Focus fire on their carriers. Without them, their drones will fall. The battle intensifies, with explosions lighting up the void. Alaric's crew fights with everything they have, their determination fueled by Kale's sacrifice. The message. Amid the chaos, a strange signal begins to broadcast across all channels. At first, it is garbled, a mix of static and fragmented words. But then, Kale's voice comes through, clear and steady. This is Kale Rhine. If you are hearing this, it means I am gone, but my message remains. The Zenar sought to strip us of our humanity, to turn us into tools for their collective. But humanity is not defined by perfection or unity. It is defined by our choices, our flaws, and our resilience. We are more than what they could ever comprehend. The message resonates across the Resistance fleet, and even among the Zenar ranks. Some of the alien commanders hesitate, their connection to the collective momentarily disrupted by the weight of Kale's words. Kale's voice continues, filled with quiet determination. To the Zenar I say this: you underestimated us. You thought we were weak because we were divided, but it is our individuality that makes us strong. We may falter, but we rise again, and as long as there is a single human standing, you will never win. As the message ends, a ripple of determination spreads through the Resistance. Alaric grips the edge of the console, his voice ringing out. For Kale, for humanity. The Resistance fleet surges forward, their coordinated assault overwhelming the remaining Zenar forces. One by one, the enemy ships fall, their once mighty presence reduced to scattered debris. The final push. The battle reaches its climax as Alaric's ship targets the last Zenar battleship. Valeth, still clinging to her superiority, broadcasts a final threat. This changes nothing. The collective is infinite. You are but a momentary disruption. Alaric smirks, his voice cold. Then consider this a lesson in humility. With a final barrage of torpedoes, the Resistance fleet obliterates the Zenar battleship, marking the end of the battle. Silence falls over the battlefield, broken only by the distant hum of surviving ships regrouping. The outcome: the Resistance fleet drifts in the aftermath of the battle, surrounded by the wreckage of Zenar ships. A heavy silence lingers as the fighters begin to count their losses. Despite the victory, the cost weighs heavily on everyone. Alaric stands on the bridge of his ship, staring out at the debris field. His crew moves quietly around him, their faces reflecting exhaustion and grief. He knows they have won, but the absence of Kale is a wound that will not easily heal. A voice crackles over the comms. It is Commander Della. All units, report status. We have done the impossible today. We have broken the Zenar's grip on this sector, and humanity owes its survival to those who gave everything. Alaric closes his eyes, Kale's final words still echoing in his mind. He remembers the look on Kale's face in those last moments, a mixture of sorrow and peace. Prepare the memorial broadcast, Alaric says softly. A galactic broadcast. The Resistance fleet broadcasts a message across the galaxy, reaching not only human settlements, but also alien civilizations that have lived under the shadow of the Zenar. A holographic recording of Kale's message is transmitted, his voice carrying across vast distances. The words strike a chord with countless listeners, inspiring hope and defiance in the face of oppression. On distant planets, enslaved populations rise up, emboldened by the Resistance's victory. Even among the Zenar's ranks, dissent begins to stir. Kale's sacrifice has planted the seeds of change, shaking the foundation of the collective's dominance. Honoring the fallen, aboard Alaric's ship, the crew gathers for a memorial service. The ship's hangar is filled with people, their faces lit by the glow of a central hologram displaying Kale's image. Alaric steps forward, addressing the gathered crowd. Kale Ryan was more than a soldier. He was a symbol of what humanity stands for: courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding belief in our ability to overcome even the darkest of times. He reminded us that being human is not about being perfect. It is about making choices that define us. He pauses, his voice thick with emotion. Kale chose to give his life so that we could have a future. Let us honor his memory by ensuring that his sacrifice was not in vain. The crowd bows their heads in silence, a collective moment of grief and gratitude. Alaric's reflection. After the service, Alaric retreats to his quarters. The weight of the day presses heavily on him, but he finds solace in a small, personal recording Kale had left for him. The holographic projection flickers to life, and Kale's voice fills the room. Alaric, if you are watching this, then I guess I am not around to tell you this in person. I want you to know that meeting you changed everything for me. You reminded me of who I was and who I could be. You gave me hope when I thought I had none left. Alaric sits silently, tears streaming down his face as he listens. I know you will keep fighting, Kale's voice continues. And I know you will do it with the same heart and strength that brought us this far. Thank you, Alaric, for everything. The recording ends, leaving Alaric in quiet contemplation. He places a device on his desk, his resolve solidifying. The galaxy's response. As the days pass, the galaxy begins to change. News of the Resistance's victory spreads, inspiring uprisings against the Zenar across multiple sectors. Civilizations long thought lost begin to emerge, their people reclaiming their freedom. The Resistance grows stronger, gaining allies and resources. Alaric takes on a larger leadership role, determined to carry on Kale's legacy. But even in victory, the Zenar remain a looming threat. Though their forces are fractured, they are not entirely defeated. Alaric knows the fight is far from over, but for the first time in years, he feels a spark of hope, the weight of sacrifice. Standing on the bridge of his ship, Alaric looks out at the stars, his thoughts returning to Kale. The man who had once been lost had found his way back, and in doing so, had given humanity a chance to forge its own destiny. Kale, Alaric whispers, his voice steady. We will make this galaxy something worth fighting for. I promise. Reflection. Months have passed since the decisive battle against the Zenar, but the scars remain fresh. Alaric's ship, the Resolute, now serves as the flagship of the growing Resistance fleet. From the outside, the galaxy seems more united than ever, but Alaric knows the road ahead is still uncertain. He stands on the observation deck, overlooking a planet that has just been liberated from the Zenar's control. Its surface glows with life as cities begin to rebuild, and its people step into freedom for the first time in generations. Commander, a voice calls from behind him. Alaric turns to see his second-in-command, Rhea, a sharp-eyed and loyal officer who has been by his side since the beginning. The council is ready for you, Rhea says with a faint smile. They want to discuss the next steps for the Resistance. Alaric nods but hesitates before following her. His gaze drifts back to the planet below. It is strange, he says quietly, to see so much hope after so much loss. Rhea steps beside him. Kale would have been proud of this, she says gently, of what you have built. Alaric smiles faintly. What we have built, a legacy in motion. The Resistance Council meets in a newly established base on the liberated planet. Representatives from various allied civilizations sit around a table, discussing plans to dismantle the remaining Zenar forces and secure peace in the galaxy. Alaric listens intently, offering his input where needed. He knows this is what Kale fought for, a future where different worlds could come together, united not by fear, but by hope and purpose. As the meeting concludes, an envoy from a distant system approaches Alaric. Commander, we intercepted this transmission, the envoy says, handing him a data chip. It appears to be from a Zenar remnant. Alaric takes the chip, his jaw tightening. The Zenar may have been defeated, but their remnants still pose a threat. He knows they will not surrender easily. The final message. Later that evening, Alaric returns to his quarters and plays the intercepted transmission. The voice of Valeth, the Zenar commander, echoes through the room. You may think you have won, but the collective endures. We are more than a fleet, more than a species. We are an idea, and ideas cannot be destroyed. Be vigilant, Alaric. Your victory is but a fleeting moment in the grand tapestry of existence. Alaric pauses the transmission, a cold determination settling over him. He knows the fight is not over, but he is ready for what comes next. The ending hook. As dawn breaks over the liberated planet, Alaric stands on the balcony of the Resistance base, watching the sunrise. The golden light washes over the horizon, symbolizing a new beginning. Rhea joins him, holding a cup of steaming tea. You look like a man carrying the weight of a galaxy on your shoulders, she says with a smirk. Alaric chuckles softly. Maybe just half a galaxy. They stand in comfortable silence for a moment before Rhea speaks again. What happens now? Alaric turns to her, his expression resolute. We keep going. For Kale. For everyone who sacrificed for this moment. The Zenar are still out there, but so are we. And as long as we stand together, they cannot break us. He looks up at the stars, a faint smile playing on his lips. This is just the beginning. The camera pans upward, leaving Alaric and Rhea behind as it focuses on the vast expanse of space. The stars shine brightly, a reminder of both the challenges and possibilities that lie ahead. The screen fades to black, with Kale's final words appearing in white text. Humanity is not defined by what we take, but by what we give. And as long as we have the courage to give our all, we will never truly be defeated.